Hello, and welcome to Introducing Me. I'm your host, Sarah. I started this podcast to get to know other people and lifestyles while discovering more about myself. Each episode, I give a new guest a chance to discuss their background, culture, interests, or whatever they want to talk about to help increase all of our own worldviews. It's that time of year where, at the end of each year of podcasting, I wrap up an episode and I do an episode with learning more about me, what's happened in my past year, and just me talking with the microphone. A couple times I've had my fiance kind of interview me as if I were the guest, but like last year, it's just me and the microphone today. If you listen to my past couple episodes, we looked back at years 1 through 3 with doing some clips from various episodes, and the main reason for that was because it is currently September. In August, I had a vacation. In September, I'm getting married. And trying to schedule my regular amount of guests was just a little bit too much with the extra things that were going on. And I thought it would be a nice break that I could still record. I have recorded in this time, but in preparation for October is what those recordings have been for. And so that was a fun little exercise for me to go back and look through various episode titles, see who popped out, and which ones I thought I could then pull from, and also a nice exercise of how long do people talk for, and how much do I need to get to an episode length that I was willing to publish. And I did that, and then was like, and then I'll record the year 4 finale episode. And I'm finally here sitting in front of my microphone recording that. So in preparation for this, was like, I need to look back and see what's happened over the last year. Many people will do that at calendar year end. They'll reflect on the past year, look into the future year. And I kind of do that a little bit, but that was 9 months ago. And I, opened my calendar back up to September to see what was I doing a year ago. And because I know, some things, it's been a lot of wedding for the last year. But I was like, I don't want to talk for 30, 40 minutes about my wedding. People don't need to hear that. So I, wrote some note down, and I realized I traveled a lot in the last year. And so I'll kind of go through that and share what's been going on. It's been a really exciting year, and I think this next year will also be very exciting. But before I kind of dive into the last year, if it's been a while since you've heard me talk about myself, or you don't know me in person, a little rundown of who I am. So I'm currently 30 years old. My name is Sarah, and I live in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Connecticut, but went to Susquehanna University, which is in Pennsylvania, and ended up moving to Pennsylvania after graduation, and have been here for almost 10 years now. And I have had a lot going on in life. I've changed a handful of jobs, but same job I had last year, that hasn't changed in the past year. I moved once after first moving to Pennsylvania, and still in that place, still have 2 cats and a fiance. We've been together for about 9 years and have been engaged for a little over 2. So we're excited. We, at this point, have our marriage license. We have practiced our ceremony. So it's just kind of, now is soon thereafter going to be the big event. And I have really, with my fiance Coleman, really started to appreciate the ability to travel. A lot of our travel tends to be a little bit more local. We actually have not gotten on a plane together. Our honeymoon will be the first time that we do that, even though we have traveled to places that have needed planes before. We just haven't ever traveled together because we haven't been going to or from the same place. We did a really long road trip, which I would have talked about in a previous year's episode. So we've vacationed together alone and done lots of fun things. Just haven't gotten on a plane together. I did get on a plane, in the past couple years. It's been very different because of COVID. So there's definitely lots of feelings around that as we get ready for our honeymoon. But, that's kind of where I'm at currently. I work in fundraising, but as I tell my fundraising professionals, I don't solicit people for gifts. I know that I'm still part of the fundraising process, but I don't want to be asking people for money. I can appreciate the people who do that, and there are a lot of skills that go into that, but I'm just not one of those people. So I work in the data side of things and enjoy what I do with analytics and cleanup and training, and it's an interesting job, that's for sure. But I'm fortunate that I do get a lot of time off with work, and I have that flexibility to take longer weekends, do short trips, and be able to see friends and experience new things. We like going to different places and seeing things we haven't done before, but then we also have the things that we love, and we're like, yes, we're going to go back to DC again. So it's been a fun year, and I'm excited for what the future has to hold. And if there are any background noises in this recording, my door is open. My cats are here. They come and go, but they are a joy. And I get the joy of next month taking my second cat to the vet for the first time. He's been to the vet. I just haven't taken him. And I really have no idea how I'm going to get him into the carrier. I was able to trick our other cat into the carrier for his annual visit earlier this month because he really likes me, and he let me pick him up and hold him and, all that fun stuff. And then I just put him in the carrier, zipped it up, and he immediately started meowing. He's not a fan of going to the vet, and then he'll just sit at the vet quietly, just kind of let them do what they need to do, and tends to be pretty subdued on the way back from the vet. But I have no idea what Socks is going to do and how he is going to handle that because he's only been for his annual visits. Jack has had multiple visits to the vet, only one extra one this year, which is really nice because we just never know really what's up with him. We also recently got a water fountain for them instead of just like a regular water bowl. There's a lot of information about why fountains are better. And when we were doing our wedding registry, we saw one on the site we were using, and it was like, why not put it on? And so someone did send that to us, and we've had it for about a month now. And I think I'm finally like ready to say like, yes, it's going well. There was some concern in the beginning about them not using it. And then I wasn't really sure if it was going to stop Socks from putting his paws into the water like while he drinks and occasionally splashing around. I think there's been less of that since getting the fountain, which is nice because it can be a mess. And it's sturdier than the bowl. We haven't had any run-ins with it. That would happen sometimes where Socks would sprint down the hall and just like crash into the bowl. So we'll see. That can still happen. It just hasn't happened yet. And they're both really good. They're, kind of a main part of our lives, and it's great to come home to them. Coleman recently switched jobs in the past couple of months and is back to being full-time. So I get home and he's not home. Prior to him switching jobs, he didn't have a lot of hours at his last job. So most times I was coming home and he was home. So it's definitely been a switch, and it's just kind of changing with the schedule. And as, we get ready for the wedding, there's always like, it's going to be a change after the wedding. I'm not going to come home and have to think about the wedding and what needs to be done and what, emails need to be sent or to-dos, getting things checked off the lists. And so I think after the wedding, there will be time to kind of, again, look at the schedule. What are we making priority time for? And I'm looking forward to that. I think as people go through the engagement process, there's a point where you say like, oh, I just can't wait for the wedding to be over. And, while that's probably trickled through both of our minds at times, we're also really excited for the event itself, for the act of getting legally married. Getting the marriage license definitely kind of really pushed that into like, it is happening, going through the actual script. We're saying more than just I do. also really pushed that into like, hey, this is happening. We're doing this. Like, we know what's going to happen. We know, in general what the day is going to look like, but it's actually going to happen. And we're excited to be able to legally be married, but also excited to have the day and the party and the food. We have so much food, and it's going to be so great. And we're, looking forward to a relaxing and fun honeymoon afterwards. But the joke has also been that nothing exists. Like, October doesn't exist. It's there. We'll get married and we'll get to October and we'll have stuff to do. We have plans. We have 2 different trips scheduled. We're going to a wedding, and we're going to a concert that we're staying overnight in a different city for. And then, holidays and travel and all of that plans. But we're kind of like, we'll think about those after we get to through the wedding. We, kind of need to one thing at a time. When we flip the calendar over to October, it'll be like, okay, married life, but also we've been living together for so many years that, things will be similar, but also things will be a little bit different. So I want to take some time to go through what travel I have done this past year. I think travel really helps figure out, kind of where you are, what you see culturally. We do kind of some of the same things over and over again, but honestly, until I looked at the calendar, I forgot about a lot of things. Like, they were there. I knew, those things happened, but even just the first thing, I kind of looked at the calendar, just looking at weekends, because that's when we tend to do our travel. That's when fun things tend to happen. And I saw this hotel booking for DC in September. And I was like, that was not, like, we did a DC trip, but I'm like, that wasn't that. There were other things on the calendar. And because of the view I was in, like, I couldn't see the whole day. And I was like, what was this trip? And then I realized I was actually a solo trip. So it's been a while since I've done a trip by my own, from what I can recall. Since Coleman moved in with me, solo trips that I've done have mostly just been home to see my parents and my family, but not like going to a city by myself, because he's there. He'll travel with me. Like, we like similar things. We have fun with that. But I went to a concert, and, the tickets were going to be expensive. And I was like, I can go by myself. I have been to DC plenty of times. I have no concerns. And the concert was really fun, and I had a really great time. But the hotel thing was a whole mess. There was like an issue with check-in where, like, I got assigned a room, but somebody else had been assigned a room. So, like, their key card didn't work, but my key card worked to the room. And then, when I got back from the concert really, really late at night, my key card didn't work. And it was this whole absolute mess. I still had a great weekend. I would have preferred to have slept a little bit more and slept more soundly. Because, like, in the middle of the night, there aren't a lot of hotel stuff there. They helped me. They were wonderful. But I also was like, I can't, like, let this go unheard. I'm gonna have to tell the manager my story. Like, this was not the experience I expected to come back to. Again, I still had a great weekend. It was a good time. Like, the concert was fun. There was just unneeded stress around that trip. I also was able to see my friend in DC. He, came and we hung out at the hotel before I checked out. But, when we were planning our next DC trip and looking at hotels, I'm like, I'm not staying at that same hotel. Like, it was a nice hotel. The people were very friendly, but the experience that I had there just, didn't want me to go back. But that trip, was kind of the first trip of the year when looking back to where I was in September. And, I pretty much kept to myself, but it's something where I don't live somewhere where there's public transportation. I'm willing to get on DC public transportation by myself and do all of that. I originally was actually not planning on using the public transportation, but it rained. It rained a lot. So to get to and from my venue, I was like, I'm not walking. That plan is out the door, because I will be wet and miserable for the concert. But I know that can be a concern for a lot of people. And even, saying, oh, I was going to walk, that could also be a concern for a lot of people. So I, know where my comforts are, and I'm familiar with DC. I don't feel that way necessarily about everywhere I travel. But it was a great trip. It was fun to do a solo trip. I haven't, as I mentioned, I haven't done one in a while, and I'm kind of like, do I want to be doing that in the future? Are there things that I want to do? And I don't know. As I said, October and later doesn't really exist, so I'm not necessarily thinking ahead about that yet. But it definitely, looking back on it, I'm like, what do I want to do in the future? The next trip that we did was actually with my brother. We did not do like your typical bachelorette or bachelor parties. Our parties like don't know each other. I mean, Coleman has both of his siblings in his party, so like they obviously know each other, but otherwise like they don't know each other. And I was like, I'm not your, go out, have an alcohol filled crazy weekend. Like I have no desire for any of that. And I was kind of like, if I do things with the people in my party solo, like that's awesome. But also, again, not required. The wedding industry has really blown things up a little bit. So the trip with my brother was actually kind of a little bit of a like, oh, this is a little like pre-wedding event. But also at the same time, we were going to an NFL game. Coleman came with us. We split some of the costs. And it was a good time. My team won. But, I hadn't been to a sports game with my brother in probably some time. We went, I'm sure when we were younger, like with family. That's not true. We did the baseball game on our road trip. And this is where like my memory is not great. But NFL wise, I believe this was only my brother's second NFL game, and it was actually Coleman and mine's third. It was actually the third for me and Coleman together. Coleman had actually also been to other NFL games. But, camaraderie in sports is a lot of fun, and it was a pretty good weather day. Not that weather matters for every single trip I take, but after, the September rain, the NFL stadium is outdoors. You kind of have to plan for everything. But it was a short trip, and I was grateful for us to do that. We got to stop at a couple other places. It was good company and a good time. And it also, I think, is maybe part of the reason, Coleman ended up doing a baseball trip with his siblings. So, it was a good fall weekend for that trip. Not travel related, but popped up when I looked at my calendar. When we got to the holidays last year, we did travel for Thanksgiving, and I'll talk about Christmas, but I think it was after Thanksgiving, we finally put our tree up, because with two cats, we've like moved our tree every single year we've lived in this house. And last year wasn't the first year we had the big tree, but we got a bigger tree. I think it was our second year using it. And so it's like, then you need the location and all the stuff, and our cats are interested in the tree. So I was like, I don't want to put the tree up before Thanksgiving and then leave. Because that could just be recipe for disaster. So we finally get our tree up. We have fun. It's always a good time to get into the holiday spirit and all of that. And I believe it was like shortly thereafter, I opened my phone, refreshed my email, and I had an email that a wedding vendor had canceled on us. So we were 9 months out from the wedding, and we just lost a vendor. And I was just like, okay, now what? Like, what do we do now? We just lost a vendor. Now, it's our videographer. So not the most important. Like, our venue still existed. Our food was still coming. Our photographer is a friend, so it's not like she bailed on us. But the videographer was one that was just kind of hard to book, because you look at portfolios and, a lot of the ones I was looking at were very similar to each other. And we picked the one we had picked because of price point. And it was just like, okay, now we have to go back to square one. And now we're 9 months away from the wedding, and these other people, they might be booked. Because when we were booking things, so many people like had our date available, because we were booking 2 years out. And knowing, the Valentine's Day proposals of the year, the summer beach proposals of the year, those had all happened. They were all booking now. If they were looking in 2024. Now, those people could have also said, we're going to get married in 2025. And maybe like that's what happened. A lot of people are doing longer engagements, as we did. You get to pick your you have a lot more options in picking. And so it was just kind of like, well, we still have the information from when we looked for a videographer the first time. We hadn't talked to any other videographers. We did like outreach, but it was kind of like we had talked to this one person. He seemed good. We liked his price point. We booked him. So we reached back out to not the entire list, but we reached out to, I think, 2 and said, do you still have our date available? They both came back and said yes, which like, awesome, great. But also like, it would have been easier for one of them to like reject themselves by not being available. But, picked kind of one that was similar, closer in similarity to who we had booked. And it was like, okay, I'll meet with you. If you're great, we'll book you. Hopefully you won't cancel on us. He has not canceled on us. So I actually got an email from him yesterday confirming the timing of when he was showing up. So, that was definitely a kink in the holiday plans. And just, as people would ask us throughout our 2.5-year engagement, oh, how's it going? What are you doing? Like, we would always say, we have all of our vendors booked. Like, we have all of the big things down. Like, we have our guest list. We sent the save the dates. We have a rough idea. Like, all of these things. Like, I purchased my dress last December. We knew what we were doing for the men's suits. We knew what the women were getting. Like, a lot of things were well planned and well moving along. And a lot of the smaller details that we're in now, yes, some of them definitely could have been done a month in advance, like over prior to the last month before getting married. In hindsight, I do wish we had done that a little bit more. I had wanted to do that a little bit more, but we were also kind of like facing this paralysis of we're not close enough. It still feels real, but it's hard to have a conversation about something when it still seems so far away. And things have been coming together in the past couple of weeks, and, I'm happy with where we are. But to, have had all of our vendors set and then to have one cancel on us, to cancel far enough out that there wasn't like I'm canceling on you at the last minute. I have lined up a replacement for you, because a lot of vendors will do that. Like if they get sick or something comes up, they have contingency plans, like they have networks that they like can reach out to. And that was not the case. And here we were trying to have to rebook someone. So didn't put too much of a damper on the Christmas spirit, but it was just kind of like, we just put our tree up. We were just, listening to our music, having a good time. And, but so Christmas came around and, in 2020, we had to stay home for Christmas. It was the first time Coleman and I had spent Christmas together. We got Jack, and we're home for Christmas. But then, in subsequent years, we did what we had always done. We traveled separately for Christmas. We didn't spend Christmas together, which a lot of people in this area were like, what do you mean you're not spending Christmas together? And it's like, well, we're spending it with our families, and, time off is a thing. So last year, Coleman was able to get the entire week off. And because he was able to get the entire week off and we wanted to spend Christmas together, we did Christmas at both families. So a few days before Christmas, we headed to his family and we opened presents on Christmas Eve. And then the next morning, I'm pretty sure we did breakfast. I don't really remember. And then we headed out and drove to my family. And that was probably the easiest drive of our life, because people aren't on the road on Christmas. The roads were so quiet. We had zero traffic. And people do travel on Christmas, but more locally. Some people are doing the things that we were doing. There was a concern of like, we're going to need to eat lunch. Is anything going to be open? So we actually at Coleman's family's house had pizza one night, and then it was like, and then we're wrapping the pizza up. We're putting it in, a cooler, and we will eat it in our car on the way from your family to my family. And so we stopped at a rest stop, and we could have honestly sat at a picnic bench, but we just sat in the car and ate, and it was fine. It was, kind of a simple little thing, but we got to my family's house for Christmas dinner, and, we're then able to celebrate with them as well. And then I believe we opened presents there the day after Christmas, to do it in the morning, because let's be real, by Christmas evening, everyone was really tired. So, when we did that last year, we were like, we have no idea what we're going to do in subsequent years because, again, like it really depends on time off. I have the 2 weeks off at the end of the year. So that's pretty consistent for me. But I mentioned Coleman switched jobs. So when he switched jobs, he said, this is time off that I already have planned and booked. I need this to work with the schedule. And they said yes, which was really great. And one of those was the week of Christmas. So we will be doing a similar thing this year, a little bit different, but similar sort of thing. And, we just kind of will continue to see what happens with years to come. It is a lot for traveling, but it's not too bad. And the drive itself, even if there was traffic, is still relatively easy. We've picked decent places to live and have to travel. But that was, it was great to be able to do that for our first time and also to be able to spend Christmas together with our families before we got married. Because then it wasn't kind of like, oh, it's the first Christmas and it's the first Christmas you're married and all of that. So it was really great to be able to do that last year. One of the things we got on Christmas was concert tickets from his sister. His sister had bought us concert tickets for me, Coleman, and their brother. And because one of the things that, as you do, it's like, what should you get the other person? And so it was in my list. Like, there were 2 different concerts that we had been looking at. And I just kind of listened to them in the things that you could possibly get us. And so it was really cool when, she got those tickets, and it wasn't like one of our favorite bands. When we've gone to concerts that have been, these are people we really, really like we listen to all of their music. We listen to their albums when they come out. We know every single song. So this was the concert, Journey and Toto were doing together. They were doing a tour. We know their music. We don't listen to every single song. We, don't know everything. So it was honestly really cool to have a concert experience that wasn't, we know every single thing. It could be a little bit more relaxed, but we still had a really great time. And so that was an overnight trip with his brother. We went into Baltimore for one evening. We did dinner, did the concert, left the next day. So a short little trip, but it was a really fun concert. And it makes me want to go to more concerts, of artists that I don't necessarily follow, but I get recommendations from Spotify all the time. Like, oh, you listen to the artist, they're coming to your area soon. They're all coming to my area soon this month, in the month of September, when I'm getting married. So I'm hopeful that next year we might be able to do some more concerts of artists that, we like and love, but don't, follow 100%. That timing is a little bit better. Even, a band we really love is currently on tour, and we would have gone to see them, but they are coming to Philadelphia within days of our wedding. And other places that we're like, oh, we could travel and go see them there. It's just like, there's just too much going on. So hopefully we'll catch them around on the next tour. And, similar sort of things. But it's also, concerts are a lot because we don't live really close to a venue. Even our closest venue, which we've been to, and some bands that we like are still touring there. The last time I did a concert there, I got a hotel room and spent the night because I didn't have to park at the venue and try to figure out how to get out and sit in my car for an hour to leave. So most concerts for us include a hotel room. And then if it's in the middle of the week, then it's like, well, then you're also taking time off. And how does that work? And all of that, it's that weekend in Baltimore was just, we were there for less than 24 hours, which is great. It's fun. But then it's like, but we could have also done other things if we had been able to have more time. So that's always a consideration in our travel. The one, we had a little small weekend getaway was to DC. We go to Washington, DC. It seems like pretty much every year, but there's so much to do. The main thing we ended up going for was a hockey game. Coleman had never seen a hockey game in person, and I hadn't been to an NHL game before. I had been to some minor league hockey and also college hockey. My brother played in the pep band in his college career, and I went up and played as well for some of their hockey games. And I remember it being a great time. And it was like, we should go to a hockey game. We watched the Frozen Four college hockey final game with my brother previously. Like, it happened to be on a weekend he was visiting here, and that was really fun and a good time. So that kind of like got Coleman interested in hockey. He's not becoming a hockey aficionado. Who knows? If we go to more hockey games, maybe he'll get really interested. But we kind of were like, what if we went to DC and saw a hockey game? Like, we know DC, we love DC. Can we find a game that fits our schedule? We found a game that fits our schedule. And in previous years of going to DC, we wanted to go and to the newest, I believe it's the newest Smithsonian Museum. Its actual title, I think, is very long, but it is the African American History Museum. I believe there's more to the title than that. But anytime we were going, like, we were typically always going to DC in June, around Juneteenth. So there were a lot of things going on. Tickets were sold out, all of that sort of stuff. But we were able to get tickets this time. So we experienced a new museum, a lot of history. It was a really good time because we hadn't been there before. Like, we both were able to experience this as new things. Whereas when we go to other museums, like, we've both been there before. They haven't changed much. So it was really nice to be able to do that and see other people there experiencing this museum for the first time as well. There's a lot of the way the museum is set up. There's like the main floor that you walk in, and there's like the lower level, which kind of goes with the historical. It is not cheery, as you can imagine, knowing American history. And then the upper levels are more recent, talk more about culture. And so you learn, like, there was like a whole music section that we really enjoyed. We did the museum the wrong way. We went up and then down. And then when we were able to get together with my friend in DC, he was like, yeah, we've been told start at the bottom and go to the top. And it was like, we didn't do any research to know that that was the recommended way to go. So now we know in the future if we, do ever go back, but it is a ticketed museum, which it's still free because it's Smithsonian, but it makes it more, you have to plan more for it. Whereas most of the other museums, the Smithsonian's are, you can just kind of like go in whenever, unless they're doing renovations and they have to, allow for different things. But it was also not great weather that weekend. It was good and bad. Like, there was some good weather and then it rained before we went to the museum, but we still had a really great time. We found a hotel that we really liked. And it kind of solidified we like going to DC. We like doing different things. We like having these experiences, and it was a really fun time. One other thing that I wanted to call out that was not travel that happened in this past year is that Coleman played for one of the local area high schools musicals. And he did that as well pre-pandemic. He did musicals a lot in his college years, I guess you could call them, around then. And so he's had fun doing that. He loves playing his instruments. I have not been in a musical, I determined, for over a decade. And we know the director, he's coming to our wedding. And the other week he reached out and was like, hey, this is the musical we're doing next year. Would love for you to play it. And there's enough trumpets so Sarah could play as well. And I was like, okay, but like, you were getting back really late at night that week. But like, I know how much Coleman enjoyed it. I believe I would enjoy it as well. And so it's just been, in theory, we've committed to it. The director hasn't gotten the books yet, so doesn't entirely know which book Coleman will be playing on. He's, stated his preference, but I'm like, when I was looking back at the calendar and that popped up, I was thinking like, okay, what about this spring? What about, so that's going to be something that we'll have to plan around. We'll have to get those dates and figure out. And Coleman was like, oh, well, like, if you have to miss a rehearsal, like, he'll be fine with it. You just won't get paid for that rehearsal. And I was like, but I need to be at the rehearsal. It's not that he needs me there. It's that I need to be at the rehearsal. So that's something fun that once we get to October, I can be more excited for and look forward to for next spring. I think it'll be really good. We have scaled back to we are only in one band, which is great. I think it really, scheduling wise, works for us. But I don't typically seek out other musical opportunities. So I think this will be a fun option. I'll see. I might end up, getting to the end of week and getting that final check and being like, wow, this check is really nice, but I am exhausted. I cannot commit to this again. Like, I don't really know. But it should be interesting. And then there were two other things that we did this summer, vacation wise. For years and years and years and years, Coleman's extended family has had a family reunion, and Coleman hadn't gone for a long time, just with scheduling and whatnot. He hadn't been going, but he went for the first time in a while last year. And I don't remember really what I was doing last year, but the timing of it and taking the time off, I was like, yeah, I'm not going with you. But when he came back from that, it's, kind of a long weekend in West Virginia in a cabin, extended family that he really likes. Like there's like the small extended family and then the big extended family reunion. But he had a good time and he was like, oh, I'd really love for you to come next year. So I went this year, and it was kind of funny because, when you say, oh, we're going to be in a cabin, kind of like in the woods, I'm like, okay, so what's the bathroom situation? What's the building situation? Do we have air conditioning? Do we, all of these things? And so we went. It was a good time. It was definitely it was multiple days being with more than just like his immediate family. So that was definitely something that was new and different. And I met additional extended family as well. So then that was, I've heard names, I hadn't met people. And because where we're getting married where we are, we knew larger extended family wouldn't be able to travel. As people get up in years, you have to consider health and ability. And so it was nice to be able to meet these people, some of whom, were getting invitations to the wedding. And so it was a good time. And we've talked about, what do we want to do for next year? How do we want to do this? Do we want to do the same sort of thing? Do we want to get our own cabin? And so it was a good time. It was fun. But it was definitely different because my family doesn't do extended family reunions. We have done large parties every 5 years for my dad's parents' anniversaries, and my mom's side of the family is very small. So it's just it was something I had never experienced, but I realized that families do, family reunions. My mom's in-laws, I guess you could call them, they do family reunions. And so I've always known about those family reunions, but every family reunion is obviously very different. And, my maid of honor, her extended family, a lot of it is in this area. So I've met her extended family because I've gone to their big extended family things, and they do a reunion, I think every year. And I've seen pictures from that, and they talk about the tree and all this different stuff. So it was just a different experience of something I had not done before. But, people were so welcoming, so excited, for us to be there. I think, because Coleman, it had been a while, he had went the previous year, but it had been a while since he had been able to go around to then be like, oh, and now you're bringing your fiance and you're getting married in a couple months. And so I was really excited. And while we haven't fully solidified what we're doing next year, it is in the summer. We have time. I don't quite remember when all of it really, they kind of do the same weekend every year, but in terms of booking the cabins, when all of that happens, I know for our family vacation that we take in August every year, it's usually in the fall that we're booking that week. So it's a lot of forward thinking and planning, and you have to figure out financially, what do you want to do? What do you not want to do? So it's definitely, there's a lot to look forward to in this next year based just looking back on things that have happened this year. And I think these next few months are really going to fly by. And as I typically do with the podcast on these yearly episodes, I talk about where the podcast is going to go. With the wedding, I haven't put a ton of thought into it, but my plan as of right now is to kind of keep the course, keep doing what I'm doing. I don't foresee things changing drastically in the next year. I would love to have more listenership, but I also realize that that requires more from me and sort of promotion and figuring out what I want to do with it. But I also, I talked with somebody who kind of like does small business related things. And I was talking about the cost of podcasting, and the cost has gone up and all of these different things. And she really reframed my mindset of like, you're spending money to put out this podcast. What is like the purpose? Like when it comes down to the end of the day, like, why am I podcasting? Is it to put a high quality thing out into the world and I want thousands and thousands of listeners and I think my podcast should be number one, and therefore like the cost is fine because I'm putting out this great thing? Like when you start a small business and you put money into something and then like, are you doing it to make profit, or are you doing to put something out in the world? And when she kind of started saying, looking at it that way, say every month I were to like decide to start getting massages monthly, like I'm spending that money because I want that benefit for myself. And I'm not necessarily looking at that as like, oh, I'm wasting money on something. And so when she reframed my mind, when thinking like, oh, well, I'm spending this money on podcasting because I'm getting something out of it. I'm, doing something for myself and enjoying it myself. I was like, well, then I'm okay, I am willing to spend that sort of money. So, at least for now, my plan is to continue where I release on Tuesdays, all but the last Tuesday of the month. That timing has definitely been a help for me. I haven't gotten as ahead as I would like. I find that extra weekend, I tend to kind of take off from podcasting instead of like forward thinking. And, so we did get into this crunch of me not having enough people recorded before the wedding. And so people are like, take the month off. And I was like, I don't really want to take the month off because I definitely feel if I were to stop recording and stop releasing, like I wouldn't come back to it. I'm aware that like the cost is there. I'm aware that I like recording with people and learning new stories and hearing from different people. I know that there are definitely some avenues I would like to take with who I'm getting onto the podcast, but I realized that like if I took too long of a time away from it, it would be really hard for me to get back into it because I would fill that time in other ways. I would continue on hobbies that I've picked up or find myself reading more. All the things that I wish I was doing more, but I think one of the main things taking away from that, while yes, podcasting, is more so the fact that there's a wedding coming up and the little things, and just, again, trying to strike that balance. If, I just did something productive, now I'm going to relax. What does relaxing look like? So for now, you can continue to expect that schedule from the podcasting. We'll see what year 5 brings us and what that means for future recording. But for now, my plan is to come back in a year, same sort of schedule, and just see where the podcast takes us. Now, typically at the end of my episodes, I do ask my guests a random question. And in these episodes, I have typically had a question prepared for me. But to be fully honest, I didn't have a question prepared for me. And since I didn't add random questions in my 3, look back episodes, I decided we could skip the random question for this episode. So the random questions will definitely come back in my next episodes because I've had them recorded and I've asked questions, but I will continue to ask my guests random questions, just not one for this episode. All right, that brings this episode to a close. So of course, come back next week and hear from, well, not next week, actually, the first week in October to hear from another guest and hear from guests there on out. If you would like to connect with me, of course, my social media is in the description and my website is in the description for the podcast, which brings you to all of the past episodes, resources, guest information, and all of that good stuff. If you would like to be a guest on the show and share your story, my email is in the description. And if you would like to donate to the podcast monetarily, there is a link to do that as well. So thank you so much for taking your time out of your day to hear my story. Until next time, bye.